Tell me a little about your folks. Where did they come from?
My mother came from Castelvetrano in Sicily, and my father came from the north, from Villafranca. Those towns I don't think are there anymore. I think they've been absorbed. Yeah. And so they were there. Papa's uncle, I believe, became a priest and was at the Vatican. My mother had the only stone house with a rambling rose on it and a stone step. And that's, her brothers came over, 4 brothers. Then she was brought over, but Aunt Margaret married and she had children, so she did not come over. But her son is here in St. Louis.
You said that your mom had some special abilities.
Yeah, Mama was psychic, and she could tell things that were going to happen, have happened. She was at the table, I remember this so well, doing the vegetables, and all of a sudden she looked off into the distance, and she said, somebody died in Sicily. And here would come the black bordered envelope saying so-and-so passed. Great.
And you mentioned that Sicilian people in the neighborhood would consult her?
Oh my God, yes. All the women would come to Mama, first with their problems, and she would advise them. They also brought their mixture of figs to make the fig bars for Christmas. And Mama was an artist. She had a tiny pair of scissors, and she would make birds, fish, artichokes, and you knew exactly what it was. And they were filled fig bars, and they were done at the holiday season. And all these ladies would bring their mixture from my mother to make them into beautiful things. Mama took her wedding gown and made our communion dresses. How she ever had the nerve to cut up her dress like that. But that's what they did. And she was an excellent seamstress, such a good cook that, what was his name? A fireman that lived next door to us came and told me before I lived there. They would visit my mother and father on Pennsylvania Street. Tell his son, come on, we'll go, Mr. Potrero will give us a glass of homemade wine. But they went near lunchtime, and he said, and Mrs. Potrero will ask us to stay for lunch. And we were poor. We were like 13 or 14 people living in that house. There was my grandmother, my uncle, my cousin Rose, my cousin Josie. My father raised these 2. Their mother died, his sister died. So Papa and Mama raised the cousins. And how could you go and visit when you're a fireman? You've got a good paying job, and Mom and Papa would take you, get your wine. That jug was always there on the floor. And all the men ate in the dining room that would come, and we would have to wait. So if there wasn't any chicken left, too bad, dearie. It's that old song, Jim, take cold tater and wait. That's how it was. Once a week, we were each handed an egg to prepare any way we wanted. I always made a custard with my egg, and my brother would steal it. Regular family things. That was fine. And we used to get the liver, heart, and lung from Mr. Dunnigan, the butcher. He would give this to us. And I still resent my brother stealing my custard, because I was the only one that made custard. You know, the others fried them or boiled them or whatever. And there went my custard, Charlie.
Well,
What can you do?
Charlie appreciated the goodies.
Oh, he sure did. He was great. You know, Charlie was big, muscular.
So he needed those extra calories.
Are you kidding? That guy he could eat you down. I don't know why Charlie picked on me like that. That's what I keep thinking. Charlie, why did you steal my custard?
Maybe it was the best thing on the table.
It was while I was waiting for it to get cool enough for me to eat. Did I tell you about the cannery? We used to go down the 18th Street Bridge. Now, I'm a little kid. The men would come in with their trucks of peaches. We'd stand there and they would throw us a peach. Do you know how wonderful that was? We never bought a peach. But they would make sure that all these kids standing at the rail got a peach to eat, a pear. But somehow we knew that the trucks were coming, so we would get down there. And when I was young, we had wood stoves all the time. There was a coat factory that made the hangers, so all the wood that wasn't usable, we would take a 100-pound gunny sack, that size, and fill it with all the wood pieces to bring home for kindling. And I was walking up the hill with this big sack of wood on my back, and the police came by. Scared the daylights out of me. They put me in the back of the police car and drove me home. A good thing for a child with the police, because people were afraid of the police. You didn't know what was going to happen. And they brought me home. Will they do that today? I wonder. We lived on Carolina, at 701 Carolina, which is where Lester is. There's a lot, and we would get a potato. Everybody had a potato, kids. And the older children built the fire. We threw our potatoes. Even though we marked them, we never got our potatoes back. It was fabulous having a roasted potato. You have to remember, we didn't have a lot of things. Mostly it was what we grew. And we had all, as I said, rabbits along there. Chickens. Can't have them today. We shopped off of trucks. The watermelon truck would come and he'd be yelling watermelon. And my dad would go out and get the watermelons, to my mother's dismay, because she's going to have wet beds with all these children eating watermelon for dinner and homemade bread. So they knew to stop. There was a fish truck, and there was also, my father would go to Chinatown to get the meat. I don't know why he ended up in Chinatown, but it must have been the best. As you know, that was he was a salesman when he was there. And he would do that. And I told you about the funerals. My dad would go to the funeral. First he'd go to Chinatown, get the meat, throw it on the table and say, Tida, and she would cook the funeral feast. So she never attended a funeral because she was always cooking for them. He went to church and he would put all the people, mostly ladies, the cars were all lined up, and he would fill this car and then the next one, and you get in this one, and he was the last, and if there was anybody left, he would take them to the cemetery. And then they'd come back, he'd come home, get the meal that my mother prepared, and brought it to the home, and people would go to that house. Fantastic. I can remember that. It's so wonderful. My oldest sister, Jenny, couldn't be found. She had the police, and he was looking everywhere also, and he said, "Don't worry, Mrs. Bolaro, we will find her." Well, they couldn't find Jenny. So he went home, I guess for dinner or whatever. Jenny was at his house, playing with his kids. So he brought Jenny home, and he said, "Now, Mrs. Bolaro, don't be upset with her." And she said, "Don't you worry, I'll take care of her." And she did. I guess Jenny never went somewhere and didn't tell Mama where she was going. So that was one of the big things. The forest on Pennsylvania Street on the west side was a huge forest. Well, not really a forest, but it seemed like it to me. My uncle would go there, and we would have mushrooms for dinner. After every rain, he would go and pick the mushrooms. And I can remember the silver dollars going in the frying pan with the mushrooms, and if the silver dollar didn't turn dark, the mushrooms were good. Oh, and that was Pennsylvania Street. We had to make our aprons and our little bands for our head, our dish towel and a pot holder, and we had an eye, a electric eye, And so then when you left the low 7, you went to high 7, then you started cooking. And we would cook things on our little oven, or it would go into the big oven, and then we would eat that, whatever we prepared. Then when we became 8th graders, the high 8th had to make their graduation dress. It was teal blue, dirndl, with a little jacket, and Olga helped me finish my little jacket. Fabulous. We used to take cardboard and wax it. And we had to stop where, I can't remember the gentleman's name. He didn't want us on his house. But we'd go up the house on Carolina, slide down on the wax cardboard. That was one of the big things for us. We fight over cardboard so we could come sliding down the hill. Fabulous. I still remember that. And we never got hurt. That's amazing.
Dirt or all?
No, Carolina.
Oh, it was?
I was a little kid. See, Kiki was born by then because the window facing 20th Street in Lester's home now, we had our 4 beds up there for the girls, and she was bouncing up and down on the bed. The window was open. Out went Kiki on her stomach. And Mr. Noto saw her fall. So he came over, told my mother, Kiki, and he drove them to the emergency. Kiki lived. It's just amazing. Because that was the 2nd story. I guess you could say the 3rd story, because it was the garage, basement, and 1st and the 2nd.
Tell me how you came to Potrero Hill.
We lived in St. Louis. I was 6 months old. There was a large mafia contingent there. One day, my dad knew all of them, but he would not join with them. And his friends in the mafia came to him and said, "Pack what you can, go to a picnic, take the train to Illinois," which was east, But you take the train west and go to San Francisco because they are coming to kill you because you won't join them. Which is how I came to Potrero Hill, lived in Florindo's parents' basement. I was but 6 months old, the 6th child.
A basement?
Yeah, we all lived with our basement. When we lived on Pennsylvania, we had our stove down there. Everything was done in the basement except sleeping. And all of us, my grandmother and my uncle slept in the kitchen part, and we were scattered, I don't know where. Don't even know how Mama managed with now 7 children.
What are the first images you remember of the neighborhood?
Oh my goodness. I remember a dog, a beautiful fluffy dog who put his paws on my shoulder and my face into the fur, and I thought I was dying. I don't pet an animal. We had every kind of animal you could think of, but I didn't pet them, and they did not bother me. It's just one of those things. That was one. My mother would put us under her skirt, and my grandmother. If a cup was given out that night, we were allowed to get out, buy a ticket, come in and get the cup, but we broke always the cup, never a dish. So this pattern to me is absolutely beautiful. I loved it. And I'm surprised that we still have a set.
What movies did you see there?
Buck Jones, Tom Mix. There was an old saying, about Tom Mix. Who's gonna marry Tom Mix? Who else was Gene Autry? We loved the cowboys and the Indians. And if a film broke, we were there doing our feet, making a horrible racket, the poor guy. We also were given a candy bar on Saturday. The show was a nickel. I would sit on the corner and cry because my father wasn't home to give me a nickel to go to the theater. I missed part of the cereal. No. That was awful, and I had to ask people, what happened to the cereal? Oh, I was so sad I didn't get to see that portion. But those stars, Lash LaRue, these are people that were part of us, at least to me. It was like they were family. And we loved it, and we called it the Flea House. My brother also worked there. He would clean all the candy bar wrappers, what have you. Sweep out the theater. That was good too, but he never got us in free. My sister Ann was married to this fellow, Reese, and he was in the Navy. He wasn't in the Navy when they married, but he was in Hawaii, and he wrote my sister and said, "There's this nice guy, have your sister Margaret write to him." So I did. Willie was lined up with the rest of his crew, and whoever the Navy person was reading the names to go on the ship skipped Willie and then went on with the rest of them. That ship was torpedoed. Everybody on board was killed. Here's my husband standing alone. We wrote for 2 years. He went to the Marianas, the Marshall Islands, all those islands he was on. He did not see any fighting because he was an aviation metalsmith. And he was 2 years we wrote. Willie came through. We were together. He met my family. He went back. He was being discharged. They wore the ruptured duck. Went to New Orleans, was discharged, sent me a telegram. Ruby, my boss, said, "You have a telegram," and it said they didn't deliver. Come at once. Crazy me, was payday. I went up to my boss, the accounting department, got my check, and he said, "But you're coming back." I said, "Oh yeah, I can't get on a train. There's no reservations." I go home, I get a phone call. There's been a cancellation of an upper berth as far as Kansas City. Do you want it? It's tonight. So I did. I went down to the show, saw my dad. He said, "Wait, I'll go with you." I said, "You can't, Papa, I can't get you on the train." But he was going to come to Nashville with me. Went to Nashville, Willie was there. Went to the Andrew Jackson Hotel. We were married by a judge on my parents' anniversary. The Monte Cristo Club was a place that these men went to, mostly the garbage men. The Sicilians that went to the Monte Cristo when they were off. My brother-in-law Sam belonged to them, and for a few years we had a women's club that would go once a month and have dinner. Fabulous meals. Those men could cook. It was just, something wonderful, and we got to see all these people because you couldn't. They would come to my mother. We went to the 9 o'clock Mass every Sunday, and at Christmas we went to midnight Mass. I remember that midnight Mass very well. Father Lynch was saying Mass. My son was the altar boy. Everybody left church, and my son is still there. He'd look around and, start to get up. Father Lynch would put his hand on his shoulder. We didn't get home until 3 on that Christmas Eve. There was something about the church for me. There was our Father O'Rourke. He had a double confessional. The other 2 priests didn't have anybody. They would come out and say, "Come over here." He had both sides. Lines of people would want to go to Father O'Rourke. So that shows you what rapport he had with us. Why would I remember such a thing? Jude Dreckenbach. Don't you know Jude? Oh dear, he knows her. Yeah, David is a doctor. Wonderful person. And of course Jude is lovely, just lovely. I've been so fortunate to meet such nice people. I never felt unwanted. And there are a lot of children that have that. I know a lot of children would come to my mother's house on the way to school and eat breakfast with the poor family. They would eat the oatmeal with us. And then one of them, I remember Olga's mother, said, "Don't you know that woman has so many children? Don't you dare stop and eat breakfast at her house. You've already eaten at home." So why did they want to come to Mama? She always treated everybody beautifully. The Anderson family with her triplets. Now Elise. Don't you know Elise? We were poor. Catholic Charities bought my graduation dress for me. That was from Everett Junior High. It was a blue chiffon.
How did you happen to join?
I happened to be put up for membership by Mrs. Dunnigan, who lived on the corner. Her husband was the butcher. So she sponsored me. You couldn't just join the Potrero Women's Club. You had to be sponsored. So and at that time it was Mrs. Wifstran was the president. Bessie Hickman was the secretary. The women were very careful. Now Mrs. Dunnigan, who sponsored me, was, one of the elders in the neighborhood who was a good woman. What am I going to say? I don't know how to explain it. And her sponsoring me, I was shocked. I thought I was a nobody then. And they asked me, her daughter-in-law asked me, would you like to join the Potrero Women's Club? She was going to be sponsored by her godmother. Okay. I said, gee, I would. Because like I said, you couldn't just join. Somebody had to be for you.
Can you read the object of the Women's Club?
Its object shall be civic youthfulness and mutual improvement. How true. We did. And we are looking for new members. Come join us. Thank you. When I was accepted into the Potrero Women's Club, it felt like family. I can remember all these ladies, and they were so sweet to me. I was one of the younger women. They were just so good to me to help me with whatever I was doing, teach me some of the things I didn't know about. It was great. I can still see all of them. Hannah Goldstein was just an absolute doll. She was the sweetest person you could probably know, except for Eloisa. Eloisa was my favorite person in church. We had fundraisers, and what we would do would be give money out. The Heart Association, cancer, guide dogs for the blind was another one. I can't recall that one. But there was another association that we tried to help. We also donated to the library because we used their room upstairs. So when they had the art show we would donate. And to this day, we still donate a very small amount because there are not many members. Come join us. We'd love to have them.
Were you involved with the club when they picketed against a freeway proposal?
I think I was there. I think I have that picture. I think I'm standing near Vera Lynn. I went to the neighborhood house a lot. When I used to take my son to the Well Baby Clinic up there. That was a wonderful thing. I had a woman came to give massages free. They asked me if I would be the first to do this. So I did. There was a wonderful thing for me. The neighborhood house was great. I loved Mrs. Maxwell. And there was Bob, who with his camera all the time. I can't say that I had a miserable life. I had my miserable times, but my memories are positive. I just love things that I like to see all of this. I do not appreciate a lot of the change. I'm still old school.
You mentioned cooking connected to Daniel Webster School.
When they started lunches for the children, I had applied as being an aide in the yard. Instead, they put me in the cafeteria that wasn't there. So while they were building it, Mr. Farrar, who was my boss, came and showed me what to do, and we served the children. I had the most wonderful children after we built the kitchen. They were all from Chinatown. I still have a thing that all the children put in to buy me an ID bracelet. I still have that. And I have a medal from China that shows the Tree of Life that one of my students brought me back and said she ran out of money, so she couldn't buy a chain. I still have the medal. It's wonderful. They thought Potrero Hill was awful. I remember riding in one of the buses, the little buses that took people around, and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Potrero Hill." "Oh, dump." That's what I got. And she let me off on Market Street. She did not take me to the ferry building, where I could have gotten a bus more direct. They didn't think Potrero Hill was great.
Why?
Yeah. Why? Who knows why? It was like a little town. Everybody knew everybody else. You didn't do anything when you were a child, because when you got home, your mother already knew it. And you thought she had eyes in the back of her head. How did she find out? That telephone tree was there. You just better not do anything that you shouldn't have done. And how fabulous that was, that no matter where you went, you were welcome. I've been most fortunate in people now. I had a good life. I hope I reach 100. It's my goal. Now, one of our ladies is 104. She's a member of the club. She lived on the hill.